Nice to see everybody. Everybody's from, I see in the chat, everybody's introducing where they're from, and we have folks from everywhere. So very nice to be with you tonight. Thank you for having me. And we'll jump in as we have a pretty large topic to talk about, and I want to make sure we try to make this as interactive as possible. So let's jump in. We're going to talk about DevOps and the impact on the business analyst. This is me and my certifications and background and all that. That's kind of our marketing slide, but I hate this slide because it doesn't tell who I am as a human. Just to give everybody a little context, I was born just outside of Philadelphia. I know everybody hates people from Philly. Sorry, I'm one of those people. But I quickly learned that I do not like snow and shoveling. Sorry for all my Canadian friends that are on the call. And I decided to move to North Carolina to play baseball in college. And that worked out really well, especially when I was walking to a final December 7th, 1994 in shorts and a t-shirt. And I said, yeah, I couldn't do this in Pennsylvania. So I don't think I'm ever going back. Fortunately, unfortunately, with my job, even pre-pandemic, I was traveling a lot. So this is me in Madison, Wisconsin, a couple days after the polar vortex a couple years ago. So there was snow on the ground. I want to say this was middle of the day and it was 4 degrees outside. So I was not a happy camper. As I was still in college, getting out of college, realizing I was not going to be a professional athlete, I decided to join a company called AIT, Advanced Internet Technologies. They're a startup company. I was the 18th employee in the company. They were or still are, a data center and managed hosting company, doing lots of different things. They have a data center in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and a lot of equipment and different things for customers all over the globe. And I was there for 19 years. And in that 19 years, I got an education, to say the least. At one point, we were at about 260 employees or so, running 24/7 operations. So to say that I've been on a few projects and had to do a lot of business analyst work is an understatement. And for probably, I'll say 12 of those 19 years, I was the chief operating officer, basically running the day-to-day operations of the company, everything from all the technology and software that we were creating to financials and marketing and sales and all that. So that's where a lot of my experience comes from. I do have a 8-year-old hockey playing little daughter, which is kind of funny. I've tried to get away from the cold and she keeps finding it. And she is a very good little hockey player. She's a scorer. She's a goal scorer. Being from Philly, I am a Philly sports fan, Phillies and Sixers for sure. But I'm a Bucks fan and have been for a long time. So for those of you who are Bucks fans out there, how about that Super Bowl win with TB? And because of the Carolina Hurricanes subsidizing a lot of my daughter's equipment, I will forever be a Carolina Hurricanes fan. So that's me in a nutshell from a personal perspective. Feel free to jeer at any of the teams that you don't like. I'm fine with that. I'm kind of used to it. So to kind of keep this conversation light, I like to inject some memes into our conversations and whatnot. So if nothing else, I hope you get a little chuckle out of some of the things that I throw in to the conversation tonight. What I'd love to do, because I want to make this, again, as interactive as possible, is if you guys could go into the chat and just give me a basic 1-sentence line of why you're here today. It could be like, this actually happened at a conference. I asked, why are you here today? And they said, oh, we thought this was the after session, and we thought that this is where we started drinking beer, and it wasn't quite the end of the conference yet. So whatever your reason is, you're not going to insult me. If you just say, I just wanted to be here because my friends are here, that's fine too. But I'd love to find out why everybody was here. Understand the BA role in DevOps framework. Okay, cool. Trying to learn as much as I can. Get learning hours. Okay. Using DevOps with New Agile Scrum team. Okay. Education. Okay. Because I have to be here is an acceptable answer too. All right, cool. Thank you for that. I really appreciate the input. So in our conversation here tonight, these are the general areas that we'll talk about. The first is, in my role, I get to peek and peer into a lot of really cool companies, and some that have really cool processes and structures, and others that really don't, that need a lot of help. So I'll talk to you about what I see as kind of the most common software development lifecycle type of organizations that we run across. Excuse me. We'll talk a little bit about what DevOps is and how it's implemented and how it can be implemented. And then we'll also talk about how you apply a DevOps context with the BA BOK, which I think is a very interesting paradigm there. And we'll talk about some pain points and enablers, and really with that, how you in a BA role can actually help implement DevOps in an organization. And lastly, we'll follow with some real life questions that I've gotten with this presentation with BAs, which I think are really contextually very good. So first, quick raise of hands. Who's heard of technical debt? Just quick raise your hand. The emoji in Zoom can do that. Okay, we got a couple. Yep. Everybody's heard of technical debt. Now, next question. Who's heard of technical equity? Got a lot of hands go down after that. Technical equity. Anybody heard of technical equity? It's not a phrase that we use very much, and I think that's a problem. We always talk about technical debt, but not technical equity. And the short answer is, I think, as you understand DevOps, this is really where you build technical equity. You always talk about technical debt, but this is really where you build it. So I'm going to give this diagram of how most SDLC organizations look. Again, this is not every single company, but this is kind of the Mike Roberts view of the world, if you will. There's usually starts out with some idea, and this could be a new product, new feature, whatever that may be, something very small, something very large, whatever it is. And there's usually that's coming from some business unit, product management, some idea center, wherever that may be. And they give that to somebody that is doing business analysis work. Again, they could be labeled as a BA, or they could be doing BA work in a different role, but they're going to do some type of feasibility, return on investment study, some basic type of understanding. Will this make us money? Does this make sense? The next step in that process is they give it to somebody to code. Whether you're doing Agile or not, somebody is going to start coding that work. And then the hope would be is they give it to somebody to do some testing. I found that sliver should be much smaller if it wasn't for the text. Usually that's the area that is not done very well in organizations. And then once it's tested and it's passed the testing, it's given to somebody to release, whether that's IT operations or whether that's a separate release management group. And then IT operations is responsible for maintaining it from a day-to-day perspective. And as we all know, if you've had any Agile understanding or Agile training at all, delivery happens there at the end of that process, right? And so the goal is to race from left to right, right? You're trying to get as far in that left to right stance as you possibly can. How can we go from concept to cash as quickly as possible? That's where the business actually gets that big return on investment. The problem is with all these different silos, if you will, there can be handoffs, and those handoffs, they can be in Jira or Rally or whatever, but they're still handoffs. They're still a game of telephone. And because of that, things lose their importance or lose the critical pieces of understanding in the course of that process. And so, of course, what that does is when whoever is responsible for deploying stuff goes to deploy stuff, it never works, or it works very poorly. And what you have is things that don't work consistently. IT operations people or release management people have to come in nights, weekends, or potentially even worse on a holiday to do deployments. And then, oh, I came in and I spent all this time on a holiday weekend only to roll back. And to roll back, then we got to do it again in another week or two or whatever. And then there's this document that you got to go back and forth with different people to have all the risk assessed. And if we roll forward, do we have a rollback strategy? And will we lose any data? And is there a compliance concern? And are we documenting this here and there? These things can get horribly complicated. And it creates essentially a whole nother work realm of deployment and managing of a deployment, right? And just one, and I'm going to highlight one, but there are several types of problems with deployments, is a thing I like to call very simply snowflake. And we're not talking about anybody's age here. We're not talking about your political affiliation or anything like that. These are snowflakes in the wild, in production. And so let me give you an example of what that looks like from a technology perspective. Let's say you have some new code that you need to deploy. And this code could be a bug fix, a feature, or a whole new product, right? So I'm going to deploy that in a production environment. I have multiple servers, and this is going to, whether this is physical or virtual, almost doesn't matter. And let's say we're a Windows shop, and we're going to have Windows Server Standard Edition, 2016 Standard Edition, as the operating system of choice. Well, you'll notice in the three examples that I gave here that two of them are Windows 2016 Standard Edition, just basic. The third is Data Center Edition. And that's because Bob, who was a new hire, had to stand up a new host and didn't realize, excuse me, that he needed to use a different CD or a different ISO to install that operating system. And he just installed Data Center Edition, not even thinking. But that's now in production and nobody's really noticed. And on top of that, the Windows Update versions are different. So you can see the difference between these three here. They are not to the same patch version. And that's because they have no way to centralized manage, look at all of the different hosts in their environment. So there's different patch versions, which potentially means that code running on that first server or the second server or the third server works differently, which means potentially users who are interacting with that software will get different results. So essentially you're trying to find a needle in a haystack if you're trying to troubleshoot a problem because the environment's not the same. And that's fine when you have, 3 or 6 machines to worry about. But what happens when you have hundreds or thousands of machines to worry about? And what about standardization then? What happens, the world is not the same. The environment is not the same. And this is a problem called configuration management, and it's a tenet of DevOps. So this is something that development folks that are doing software development and those that are doing IT operations need to collaborate on to make sure that there is a stable, similar environment across different machines so that code operates the same, right? And the way that this manifests itself in organizations is all over the place. You'll see because of this, deployments are so bad that the CIO says, I want a way to create push button deployments, or I want a way that we can easily manage the tools that we have, or the new tools that we're using, they're very complicated and we're not seeing the benefits of them, right? So there's all these different views of the world and the problems that are being created because of these types of problems, these type of snowflake problems, if you will. And I'd like to back that up of why those things exist and the concepts of DevOps. So the name DevOps, obviously it's Dev and Ops, right? If you're not familiar with the types of groups, it's people that are doing software development, coders, developers, engineers. Everybody likes to call them different things, but people that are actually writing code. And then people that are doing management of services and management of infrastructure. And that could be physical or virtual. I have a picture here of a NOC, Network Operations Center, and that could be because the data center's 2 doors down, or that could be you're managing your infrastructure in AWS. So these main constituents have different goals. So the software development side is rewarded essentially for creating value, right? Think of your agile principles, right? I want to get product deployed. I want to get things out there. I want to do a demo and show the cool things that I've built for the product owner and the rest of the organization. They're rewarded essentially for getting things out to show value to the customer. But IT operations essentially is motivated by almost the exact opposite. They're penalized for downtime. They're rewarded or potentially even bonused for uptime. And that means they don't want to change anything. I mean, think about it. If this was your job, don't let anything go down. And if you have 99.999% uptime, you'll get an additional bonus of $10,000. If I was in that role, nobody's changing anything. Nobody mess with the power. Nobody blink. Don't move for a year. I want to get my bonus, right? So they're essentially, and organizations have done this for years, they're incenting them to be adversaries. And what the way that comes to fruition is IT ops and dev teams don't like each other, and they want to fight each other all the time because they see the opposite polar reaction in each other. One wants to change and the other one doesn't want to change at all. And so that creates, as organizations kind of try to address this, they throw the term DevOps in, right? And in doing so, they may end up using the term wrong, or may think that it's just some tools. And because they use the term wrong, or they just think it's tools, DevOps now has a bad connotation in the organization. And it's no longer something that anybody wants to be a part of, because DevOps doesn't work in our company, right? So I think, that in and of itself is a problem. We'll talk a little bit more about what DevOps is, but just kind of put a bookmark in that. All right, so what is it, and then how do we implement it? And the way I break this down is, what are organizations trying to achieve by implementing DevOps? And you see the fighting between the dev and the ops team, right? You're trying to avoid that, right? So what is the right definition of DevOps? And I like to say, and this is a definition, a working definition, I guess, because there's so many different definitions out there. I like this one. This was adopted by a couple different thought leaders in the space as something that they can talk through and explain to C-level executives about what DevOps is and kind of the benefits just from the definition. So I've highlighted the areas that I want to run through here. So smaller batches of software work. Smaller batches meaning if it's a small change, I can push that through the system, see if the system reacts well to it. If it does, I know it worked, and I can push another small batch through. It allows me to go very quick. So in this case, think of how Agile works. I can do a 2-week sprint. I can deploy some code. That code is now out or tested and out to the production environment, or at least maybe a staging environment. And it is out and good, and it's been tested. And I know that I don't have to, there should be very, very few quality problems coming back and rework and things like that. So smaller batches go through the system quicker. That's kind of the first phrase of this DevOps definition. The second one is deployed more frequently. Now, when I say more frequently, there's a lot of companies that will do deployments twice a year, 4 times a year, once a quarter, something like that. When we talk about more frequently, we're talking about multiple times a day, multiple times a week, not 1 time a quarter. More frequently is just that, very frequently, even to the point where multiple times a minute. In some instances, that is a real thing that you can do. The third line, with less planning and more adaptability. So I don't want to spend all day in meetings, and I don't know anybody that does. And I do want to have the ability to change and modify things as I go through that environment, right? So the adaptability thing comes in where if I deploy something, I want to be able to roll it back very quickly. If it doesn't work, I want to be able to keep moving and to do the next thing very quickly. I don't want to have these long wait periods where nothing can be done, or no work can be done, or no changes can be done. So being able to change and maneuver and adapt without having to wait. And then the last part, and this is, I think, the part that addresses my Samuel L. Jackson, say DevOps one more time, by people working better together. And this is the part that I think most organizations, that when they're trying to adapt a DevOps model, they take for granted, because if you've ever worked with IT operations staff, if you've ever worked with developers, they are cut from different cloths. And I cannot emphasize that anymore. They are different types of people with different types of thinking. And if they've never really worked with the other side of the fence, they usually don't like them. And this is where I think DevOps having this as a definition is really important, because this is really where the rubber meets the road and the big differences come in terms of delivering value to the organization. In the course of these DevOps community trying to adopt some principles and publish some things, they came up with this acronym called CAMS: Culture, Automation, Measurement, and Sharing. And I'll give you some examples of some of these, because I think understanding this this acronym will give you a lot of insight on what that really means to have a DevOps environment. So when somebody says culture, now I do hate that the C is the first letter of this acronym. I really think it should be one of the last, because I think it's something you grow into. Nobody installs culture. And so to talk about it without talking about the other ones first is kind of a little out of order to me. But the core parts of this are trying to find some common ground with everybody else in the organization that has input. So IT operations and developers. If you start to what does the customer want? What is the end state of the customer? What is the end state of me as a developer? What is the end state of me as a IT operations person? What do I want out of this environment? How do I want people to view me and my role in this thing that we're doing, this DevOps thing that we're doing? And concept here would be, oh, as a developer, IT operations person, I didn't realize that you're going to get called in at 3 in the morning on a Saturday to come fix maybe a coding problem that I made. And I made that problem on Wednesday. We deployed on Thursday, and it just ate up CPU and memory cycles until the server crashed on Saturday, and you had to come in. Okay, that's my fault, man, and I didn't realize that. And that's a real thing. That's a conversation that you would think would happen more often, but it really doesn't. And this is where the term hug ops comes in. Oh man, I didn't realize that was a problem I created for you. Here, come here, give me a hug. So this concept of culture and not playing the blame game, looking at it as a way an opportunity to improve. How can we make this thing that happened never happen again? And we start having those conversations. Really smart people like developers, really smart people like people in IT operations, they'll figure those things out at the end of the day. They just have to have a culture that allows them to communicate at a level that it's not a blame game, right? So culture is the first part of this. Second is automation. So I have a great story about automation. I worked with a guy, his name was Gus, and Gus was a systems administrator, kind of manager. He was the manager on first shift for all the systems administrators and some of the engineers. And one of the things that Gus would do or be responsible for was the backups of our environment and making sure the backups were working. Now, Gus didn't do this himself. The folks on third shift, the systems administrators on the graveyard shift, the midnight to 8 a.m. shift, were the ones that were actually doing the backups. Now, this is years and years ago. I'm going to date myself. You can see the gray hair in my beard. This is back when we were doing tape backup. Now every day is all the things are disk to disk and those type of things, but this is disk to tape. So the systems administrators had to make sure that like tapes were rotated and the right dates were put on things, and they knew what was what. And they were doing that in the middle of the night from roughly 8 a.m. or sorry, midnight to 8 a.m. And so Gus wanted to revamp the backup process, and things were kind of the day shift work essentially was backing up. And I looked at Gus, I said, hey, why are things backing up on day shift? Oh, I'm working on redoing the backups. I'm making some automation. I said, okay, well, let's get caught up. How long is it going to take you? Oh, another week or two. Okay, cool. 2 weeks go by. I'm like, hey, Gus, are we done with the backup thing? Yeah, I'm getting ready to deploy it. Okay, cool. So finally, all of a sudden, all the work kind of disappears and we're caught up. And I said, hey, Gus, what happened? He goes, well, I fixed the backups so that the third shift doesn't have to manually do them, so they can do all my day shift work. So I don't have anything to do during the day. And now I can actually go and walk around other departments and innovate. And that was like an epiphany for me. Like Gus wasn't just doing the work to be cool or doing the work to as something to do. He was doing it so that he could get stuff off of his plate to go innovate with other departments and find out what else they needed, what else he could do for them. So think about automation as a way to get things off of your plate. That includes acceptance testing and all these little automation tools, these little automation things. They go a long way, and finding a way to do that is a big part of DevOps. But it's not the only thing. Remember, it's not the only thing. Measurement, I'll say one thing about measurement. It is very, very simple. If you want to improve something, you have to be able to measure it. That's a staple in the DevOps community with regards to measurement, which means you have to have all these different metrics, these different systems. There are tons and tons and tons of tools out there. These are normally ops responsibilities, but the dev teams can actually build things in that monitor and measure things in the course of their software that could make other people more educated on the measurements and how the software is doing. There was a company that actually advertised that they were going to launch a new version, and that feature was going to be, that new version was going to be 2 times faster than the previous version. And it turns out it wasn't. And ironically, nobody actually built that in. The marketing people threw that in, and nobody on the tech side actually had anything to do with building something that looked at that. And because it wasn't, they had to go build something. And before you know it, they were like, oh yeah, it's actually slower than the previous version. But once they saw that, once they were able to measure it, they were able to build something that actually tracked it, and they could make it faster. They could say, oh, we need to fix this, we need to fix that. Before you know it, I think maybe 2 weeks after it launched, it was 2 times faster, simply because they had something to measure it and say, no, we're not where we need to be. So measurement is extremely important. And then last in this acronym is the sharing acronym. And the phrase here to take away is shared vision, shared concept, shared responsibility, shared input. If everybody feels like they have the ability to impact the outcome, to impact the product, to impact the customer, they'll usually share. And transparency is extremely hard for folks in IT operations. Again, these are folks with administrative root level access to systems. And I know plenty of folks that have root that have screwed something up, and nobody really, or as people started to notice, they were able to fix it real quick simply because they have root. At the end of the day, they never want to say, oh, I screwed that up. So being transparent and getting them to open up about those things is extremely hard. But once you do that, they have the ability to not only impact, is stuff up or down, but they have great insight. And that sharing, as long as they're sharing it with the right people, that ends up creating better systems and better outcomes for the organization and the customer, right? So fast forward a little bit to the mid 2000s or 2010s, if you will. And along comes a gentleman named Jez Humble. If you're not familiar with the name, please go look Jez up. Jez has a bunch of talks that are on YouTube, and he is even cooler in person. He's one of the smartest people I've ever seen. There's a couple folks at C Prime that have a fanboy crush on Jez. Really, really smart guy. And he introduced this concept of lean into the DevOps concept and changed the acronym to CALMS. And essentially, if you're not familiar with lean and some of the lean concepts, you're focused on increasing customer value. You're trying to eliminate waste, and waste is defined as anything that adds to the work but does not add to the value or the output. Management should be a facilitator, not a dictator, if you will. There should be involvement and feedback and input by all employees. And there should be this view of continually improving the system. There should be a long-term goal of making the system better in a year from now and 2 years from now, whatever that may be, whatever that may look like, but making the system better. If you look this acronym up, you'll probably also run into an acronym that the Scaled Agile framework uses, and they replace the S in CALMS, which is the sharing, with an R, and the R stands for recovery. And I kind of like that better, to be honest with you, simply because R standing for recovery, S is the sharing is very similar to the culture. So I think, I like the R there, because recovery means if you can roll something forward and you can roll it back real quick if things don't work or there's a problem, that means that your systems are in really good repair, and you don't have to worry about how is the system going to handle it. Oh no, we pushed something forward that broke something. Oh, now we got to spend all week trying to fix it. If you can recover very quickly, you can then assess and what happened and do that offline without impacting customers or other employees. So calmer is another version of this that you may say. I love that people just say, oh, we'll just do the culture thing. It doesn't work that way. But I think this is, one of the starting points that you can create that culture is to have folks in your organization read the State of DevOps report, and the 2021 version actually I think should be out very soon if it's not already. The key indicators for good IT performance have actually pretty much been the same since 2014. So if you want to try to do anything, if you do those 7 bullets, you'll really end up creating a phenomenal culture and really good DevOps practices in your environment. Version control, there's tons of different software for version control, a continuous integration and deployment process at a minimum, continuous delivery process, which we'll talk about here in a second. Automated acceptance testing, again, that automation is really important. Peer review for production or some type of external review, make sure that you're not doing things in a vacuum. A really good high trust culture where there's communication back and forth between dev and ops. Lots of monitoring to determine, are we measuring things? Are we measuring all the things? And can we determine if things don't go well? And then a really good win-win relationship between dev and ops. So read this, if nothing else. This is a really good study, a survey that comes out every year. A really, really big step forward in the DevOps movement. And this was in the early 2000s, maybe 2004, 2005, by Werner Vogels. He was still is the CTO for Amazon, and his the brainchild of Amazon Web Services. And essentially the you build it, you run it model was this concept where teams had to support and be a customer service desk for other teams in the organization, that when they build an API, they had to be the customer service desk for that API. They were not allowed to like shove that off to some other group. If they built something, they had to own it. And when they owned it, they felt like they were more responsive to the needs of other customers, which were other teams in Amazon. And that allowed them to immediately be more responsive, to be more receptive, to not push things off and not, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be bothered. Well, if I listen to my customers or the other employees at Amazon, I can make an even better product, something that everybody really loves. And thus, over time, they end up creating some really, really cool tools with AWS and all the additional things that they created, which is really witnessed here. Look at some of these stats, which these are like amazing. And I put these on here simply because I've had people say, oh, well, we're a publicly traded company, or we're a highly regulated company. There's no way we can do DevOps because it doesn't work that way. That's not the case at all. You can still do all the documentation, all the compliance stuff that you need to. And Amazon is a living proof of this. Now, granted, they weren't dragging legacy forward like some insurance companies that have been around for 40 years, 50 years. So it's a little bit different, I know. But look at some of these stats: 11.6 seconds between deployments during the weekday. Number of 10,000, the mean number of hosts simultaneously receiving a deployment. And of all things, this was 10 years ago, folks, over 10 years ago. So if Amazon can do this 10 years ago, I'm pretty sure your company should be able to do it in 2021, 2022. There's no reason it can't happen. I was often asked, give me a list of the things that DevOps teams do. So here's your list. They automate manual work. They collaborate and share resources across IT departments. They try to standardize and virtualize where needed infrastructure. So your servers, your databases, your test environments, those type of things, so that they can be easily maintained and managed. They're trying to make sure that teams can deliver software faster. And when I say faster, I mean like once a minute, like not once a quarter or once a year, once a minute. They're also asked to empower developers for self-service. And this is really like a really big shock to some IT operations folks. They're like, I don't want any developer anywhere near my production environment. And it's like, okay, well, what do you not want them there for? I don't want them to screw something up. Okay, cool. If we could restrict that, but give them and empower them, what would that do for you? What problems would that address? And so they're trying to make things more self-service. Monitor and measure, we talked about measurements, and then continuously improving the system, whatever that system is, right? All right, so we're going to jump into everything continuous. This is a really good conversation point. Everybody brings up the names: continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous delivery, and what do they mean? So we'll give you some base definitions, and then we'll kind of talk you through what that looks like. So the first one is continuous integration. You'll hear people refer to it as CI. And essentially that means bringing all of the core code together and integrating it and putting all the files, all the includes, all that stuff together and compiling it. And not having multiple shared trunks or feature branches, having one main trunk and including all of that on a regular basis. And Probably the best use of this, or the best example of this, is don't leave your workstation every day until you've pushed your code and committed your code to the source repository, because every night we try to do a build. And if that build fails, it lets you know the next morning. If that build passes, great. All the code that you built yesterday is good the next day. We know that it will build into the product that you're trying to build. The next continuous version is continuous deployment. And so this is after a build passes, it could go through some validation and then potentially get to production. And this is, this is an Amazon example, a Netflix example. This is not necessarily every company, partially because you can't do that with all types of software. You can't actually deploy it into production. And so that's what continuous delivery is. Continuous delivery is basically a build passes, it's ready to go, and I'm going to put it in an area where it could be available to be deployed, but somebody is going to make the decision, whether that's product management, whether that's support personnel, whether that's whoever, they're going to make the decision on when to deploy it. It's deployable, but it's delivered to the standpoint where someone can pick it up and put it where it needs to go. For example, if an app developer for your mobile device updates an app 27 times over the course of the day, you're not getting 27 updates on your phone. Apple and Google only allow you to do that once a week or something like that, right? So it'll update, and then it's not going to update anymore over the course of the next couple of days, right? So this is continuous delivery, not continuous deployment. So those are the differences between the two. So I'm going to give you an example of a real pipeline and what that looks like. So I'm going to draw a little bit on this screen. So let's say I create some software, and at the end of the day, I check my code in, and it triggers in version control that this is a brand new piece of code. We're going to try to build it and test it, and it fails. So the next day, I get an email as a developer, and I'm told, hey, this did not pass this test. You're going to need to change your code. So the next day, I update my code, I check it in, it triggers another build and test. It passes this, it goes to the next automated acceptance testing. It maybe fails that. So the third day, it goes back to me. And the third morning, I go in and check my code in, I update the code, and it goes all the way through. It passes the automated acceptance testing and maybe gets to either some manual acceptance testing or potentially out to a release team. So that's an example of what a continuous deployment or continuous delivery pipeline may look like, a CI/CD pipeline. That's kind of what that looks like in the wild. As a BA, you're going to want to know some of these tools that exist. I will tell you, you don't need to know all these tools, and there's some really cool tools, like cool names. There's Broccoli and Maven and Jenkins and Bamboo and Docker and Salt and Ansible. There's all these really cool tools. At the end of the day, the number of DevOps tools is going to vastly outweigh your ability to remember the tool and what it's used for. So as a BA, do not try to remember all of these tools. What you should focus on is at the top of this periodic table, and that's the category of tool. And those categories are things like source code management, continuous integration, deployment tools, BI and monitoring, logging, all those things. You should understand the problems that those tools fix in an organization, and maybe some of the differences between tools. That's as far as you really need to know. You need to know, what do we use for source code management? What do we use for version control? And that should tell you everything that you need, because you then understand what version control is really for, what it's supposed to do, what the ultimate goal is, right? So I would tell you, if you ever are asking developers or working with developers and you're trying to figure out what are they using for different tools and different things, look at what bucket these tools fall into and make sure that you understand what the business value, what problem those solve. This is an example of a tool chain with a customer that we work with. Notice that they use a lot of different tools. They span different vendors, different organizations. So they're not really, you don't have to use one specific tool. You have ability to use multiple different tools for potentially the same thing. Different teams may have different requirements for different tools. So that's a real thing. I know we just spent a couple minutes talking about tools, but just remember this, tools aren't the only thing. If somebody starts talking to you about DevOps and they start spouting off tools as the only thing. They don't talk about how people work better together. They don't talk about automation. They're missing the boat. The tool should be a way to facilitate things that are maybe hard to do manually or take too long to do manually. That's what the tool should ultimately do. It should not be the focal point. We're going to install this tool and we're going to be DevOps. That's not really how that works. Okay, so we're going to connect the dots now with you as a BA. How does this apply to you, and how can you help drive BA adoption? So the first thing is the BA knowledge areas, the BA block knowledge areas still apply. You're still going to have to do requirements analysis. You're still going to have to do planning and monitoring. You're still going to have to do requirements lifecycle, elicitation, all that stuff. You're still going to have to do that. That's not going to impact. If you do this stuff, it's not going to change whether you're going to be able to do DevOps or not, right? So you're still going to do that. You're still going to do the core concept model, the who, what, when, where, why, all those things. That still exists. That's still a thing. You're going to have to continue to do that. And I know that IIBA has changed this picture. They've got a different picture for the different requirement levels, but that still exists. You're still going to have to understand which level of requirements or objectives is it, and then what type of requirement is it? Is it a process? Is it a scenario? Is it a data requirement? All those different type of things. You're still going to have to do that. That does not change anything on the downstream side of things with DevOps. But you have to remember, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You're not going to do DevOps day one the perfect way. All right? You're going to have to start very small, start doing something small, and then move from there. And then this is how you can help the stakeholders that are ultimately trying to move an organization into that DevOps model. I always like to talk to BAs about this, because you have the ability to really help people out, and you may not even know it. And so I'm going to highlight a couple of things that I've seen work very well over the last couple of years with DevOps implementations. So how can you help software and systems architects? They are dealing with technical debt. We talked about technical debt earlier. They're dealing with legacy technology. And at the end of the day, they're trying to move more to a service-oriented architecture. And if you're not familiar with generally the concept of a service-oriented architecture, think about a diner, one of those shiny diner places. The waiter or waitress will come and take your order. They'll take the check and they'll put it in the little window, right? And that's an input, right? The check has what you want on it. And they're not going back and touching the food or putting a plate together and putting stuff on it. They're not doing any of that. They're putting a check in a window, and the cook will come by and grab it and then make the food. And then the output of that is the plate of food, hopefully to what you ordered. And that's a service-oriented architecture. The waiter or waitress does not need to understand where the eggs are in the kitchen or which plates are clean and which ones are dirty. They just understand, hey, I have to give this in and this has to come out. So that service-oriented architecture, that's the way that systems and software architects have to look at things. They need to build it in that way. That's their ultimate goal into moving into a DevOps architecture. For software developers, we talked about this. They're going to have to be able to do agile practices and scale it. They're going to have input on doing things themselves and even have operational support. Maybe they don't have root access, but maybe they can see the production environment. Maybe they can monitor things in production. Maybe they have autonomy to deploy certain things without having IT operations there to monitor and manage things. And they also should be treating infrastructure as code. If you're not familiar with that, that is a whole different talk. But versioning essentially of the code that they the infrastructure that is being used. IT ops, they are always seen as this cost center. Oh, they want a new toy, or oh, they need to pay for this software, or oh, they need more servers, or more whatever. They're always seen as that. And what they should be viewed as is they should be a major producer of value. So they should show, hey, we've helped the dev team and the product team change this stuff in production. We've made this more streamlined. We've included things, and we're more collaborative earlier in these projects and the processes, so that we can have input. And we're implementing automation to make things easier. And we're going to our developer counterparts and saying, where can we help? As opposed to, I'm just going to sit in my dark room and only be bothered when something goes down. And then software testers, they're going to have to look at things like test-driven development, TDD, behavior-driven development, which is a very similar concept to automated test-driven development. And they're going to have to view things differently. There's a lot of testers that will go, oh, if I automate my tests, I'm going to lose my job. That's not true. They have to think from a scaling perspective. What cool things could they find? What cool problems could they alleviate if they were able to build even more automated tests for the products that are going through their purview? And then lastly, change managers, and these can be any number of different titles: managers, directors, individual contributors, people that are on these change management board positions. They try to make sure that things are right before they go out to production. Maybe something along the lines of being responsible for compliance things or audits or whatever. They should view the engineering as a product, and they should embrace automation and ways that they can allow compliance and auditability to not have to be done by hand. That they can, as long as you meet the criteria and it checks out, check it once a month, once a quarter, you don't have to review it every 5 minutes. It's going to stay the same. It's going to make sure that you're in compliance. You have to be able to understand it's a leader-driven change and not this change board, right? Let the leadership dictate what goes to production, what's held back, those type of things. All right. Lastly, here's a couple great questions that I got from BAs in the past on this talk. What DevOps tools should BAs be using? Whatever tools you're using today is probably fine. Requirements tools and story logging tools, things like Jira and Rally and version 1 and all those things are just fine. There's no BA specific tool that fits into a DevOps model. There's lots of tools that you're probably already using. How can BAs enable DevOps in their organization? Hopefully I answered that question with some of the stakeholder stuff. Will DevOps be the end of BAs? That is not a worry at all. Does the BA block play nicely with DevOps principles? I personally think so. I don't think there's anything that conflicts between the two. And then do BAs fit into DevOps? Absolutely. BAs are freaking rock stars, and they need to be around in every organization, not just in ones that are implementing DevOps. I wouldn't be remiss if I didn't mention that C Prime offers training in this area. And on top of that, they're offering a 21% discount for anybody that signs up between now and the end of September. If I were to offer or recommend any training at all, I would recommend these two courses: the Fundamentals of DevOps e-learning, which is again an e-learning course, and then a DevOps implementation bootcamp, which is ironically a not very technical class, and it is a certification class through IC Agile. Definitely recommend that class as a good foundational model for DevOps. I like to give some recommended reading as a takeaway too. So first and foremost, the Phoenix Project. If you've not read the Phoenix Project, please go do that. It is a super great read. It's a short read. It's a fiction book. You could probably say that I started reading the Phoenix Project and I started going, wow, this is about me and my role at AIT over the years, because I felt like there was very similar problems that the gentleman in the book was addressing and that I was addressing. Leading the Transformation is a great book about HP LaserJet printers between 2008 and 2011. Company almost went under. It kind of talks about that and how Agile and DevOps actually made them so much more efficient. And the last book, for those of you who know what a VCR is, it reads like VCR instructions, but if you're really technical, it's a great book by Jez Humble, Continuous Delivery, written in 2011, and has some principles that are still being applied today. So very, very good book. So here's my conclusion. High trust culture, CICD, automation is not the only thing, and tools aren't the only thing, and make sure you help stakeholders because they need help. Now, I will take questions.
Thank you very much, Michael. I believe there's a question from a partner in the chat, and I will read it out for everyone to hear. Could you briefly touch about DevSecops, please? Sure. How does security part come into the picture?
Sure, great question. So I would love to update this presentation to be, DevSecops as well. Some organizations, it's applicable and something that they can adopt, and other organizations, for whatever reason, it is not something that they can adopt. So at the moment, I don't know that I would, say DevSecops is for everybody. The concept of DevSecops is everything that we talked about with DevOps, but the part of the organization, and especially in IT, that gets forgotten about the most is security. If you're in a highly regulated organization, banking, something like that, security is like, this really paramount thing, and you do this project and then you get done with it, and then security has to take it for 6 months before it can actually go live. And it's like, man, what if we included these people in the beginning of the project and they could look at security through the whole thing? How would that go? And that's essentially the concept, is including the security groups with tools and whatnot a lot earlier in the process. Unfortunately, some software implementations don't really allow for that. Things have to be kind of done before it can be reviewed, and it still takes that amount of time. So I like to say DevSecOps works for some organizations and industries, and maybe not quite yet for others. But I would 100% say DevSecOps is something you should understand. And if it applies to your organization, roll with it. Essentially, at the end of the day, it's just including the security teams a lot earlier in your conversations.
Thank you, Michael. I have one question from Jason. He's asking about the term AppOps. How real is that term?
So I've heard that term maybe twice. And I don't know if it's just somebody doesn't like the term dev, but sure, whatever works. At the end of the day, like there are organizations that take terms that are kind of industry standard, like, I don't know, Scaled Agile Framework and SAFe. Rather than calling it SAFe in certain organizations, they call it SAGE or R Agile or whatever. So call it what you want. At the end of the day, it's people that are writing code and people that are managing infrastructure working well together. So yeah, I'd roll with it if it works for you.
All right, thank you. Question from Martin. How embedded do product owners need to be in a DevOps team? And do you see a BA as fulfilling a proxy PO role where they cannot?
Yeah, so I like to think of it this way. DevOps and Agile are two ends of the same spectrum. So you don't have to do anything different from an Agile adoption perspective. So as a product owner wouldn't be embedded with the team, whatever is the right level in your organization. For example, if you have a BA already on a team and they're a proxy product owner and they sync with the product owner on a regular basis, and they have the ability to act as the product owner with the team and make sure that they are given good guidance. If that works for your organization, cool. And I don't see any reason that that wouldn't be extended into a DevOps model. And very much so if there is a product owner and no BA. So that works too. I would say whatever is working or whatever will work for your organization with Agile, it should work in a DevOps context too.
All right, thank you. Question from Shailandra. How does DevOps improve blockchain type of processes?
Ooh, wow. Okay. I may need to ask for some elaboration on that one. So at a first glance, so DevOps, think of it as whatever you're writing, whatever product is being created and pushed out. It could be a blockchain tool. It could be anything. So whatever goes through the meat grinder, if you will, it's just grinding the meat. Whatever you're pushing through there, whatever type of application, if it's a blockchain application, cool. But I don't think DevOps necessarily will change what you're pushing through that meat grinder, if you will.
All right. One from Deborah. Can DevOps be considered a requirements management tool housing user stories and relating them together? she's not able to see easily how requirements relate together hierarchically, like she's used to in this tool.
Okay, so I think, Deborah, I think, and I may be wrong, but what you may be referring to is a Microsoft tool called Azure DevOps or ADO. And I hate. I love Microsoft, but I hate that Microsoft used the term DevOps in that tool because it in of itself is not DevOps, but they named it DevOps. So many BAs go, oh, the talk is on DevOps. Well, I'm using DevOps. Well, you're using DevOps. What are you doing? Oh, I'm logging my stories in this tool. Azure DevOps is just a tool that could allow you to do DevOps and CICD more efficiently. But just logging stories doesn't necessarily make you DevOps, if you will. It's just a tool that happens to be named DevOps or have the DevOps name in it. So the tool aside, it does have hierarchical capabilities. It is, I would say, a much more complicated tool than it probably should be than most Microsoft tools, but it does have the ability to be hierarchical. It's a little bit more complex to do that, but it does have that capability.
Thank you, Michael. I thought so too, that it was the Microsoft tool she was referring to. One question from Shefali. Could there be an instance where DevOps practice may not require the business analyst, or let's say the business analyst role should be refrained from being used, not to impact the DevOps delivery?
Oh, wow. No, I would say, by and large, I do another talk that talks about the Scaled Agile framework, and I quote the leader of the SAFe practice here at C Prime. His name is Ken France, and Ken is an SBCT, which is the highest SAFe certification there is. He's also a SAFe fellow, and he's had stuff published inside of the framework that he's actually done. So to say, he sees a lot of SAFe implementations as an understatement. Like, he's part of the founders of the framework. And I asked Ken one time, I said, hey, where do you see BAs in a SAFe implementation? And he's like, SAFe doesn't talk about BAs enough. They really belong on the teams, being either a proxy PO or something like that. And I kind of think very much the same thing that Ken said with DevOps. I strongly believe that if a product owner isn't there with the team every day and answering questions and making sure things are aligned and organized, that a BA should be on the team to be able to do that. And so I don't think DevOps necessarily changes that type of structure. I think there may be different questions and kind of like the points about how you enable different folks in your organization or on the teams that you're working with. I think that is impacted, but not necessarily how POs or BAs should be implemented. I think whatever works from an Agile perspective will work from a DevOps perspective.
Thank you, Michael. All right, that seemed to have been the last question.
Ooh.
That was good. We had a lot of good questions.
Yeah, very good questions, guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in. Does anyone else have a question verbally before we wrap it up? All right, I'm guessing none. All right, I will share my screen very quickly so I can wrap this up. First of all, Michael, thank you very, very much. I was looking forward to this session. After the last time we had you on, I was excited to have you on again, and you have again just delivered higher than the last time. So thank you for your time. Thank you for the content. This was wonderful. Just a reminder, along with some of the C Prime certifications and trainings, which I'm sure will count towards continuous education for maintaining some of our IBA certifications. If you are just getting into the field, trying to figure out where you are, or trying to cement your professionalism as a BA, there are the 3 core certifications, as well as the specializations in cybersecurity, agile, product ownership analysis, and data analytics. Right now, there's no longer chapter membership. So if you are a member of IBA and happen to pick up, select a chapter that is close to you geographically, you automatically become a member of that chapter as long as you're a good standing member of the IBA. So if any of us is in South Florida, please make sure you check that on your profile, on your IBA membership page, and we'll be happy to have you on board. We're always looking for volunteers to help the chapter grow. We have board positions open. We also have various volunteer positions in different arms of the organization, from communication, sponsorship, outreach, and administration. So if you're looking forward to volunteer, put some of your soft skills to use, or promote the business analysis discipline in the South Florida locality, please do reach out to us. And then for some of our upcoming events, you will be hearing from Michael Roberts again in the coming future in November, as he talks to us about AI and machine learning. But we have Enoeka, who is going to be our speaker next month. And then Rachel Woododink taking us on the IBA's take on agile product ownership. And then we'll be having our chapter annual general meeting on the 31st of this month. This will specifically be for local chapter members of South Florida, but everybody else is welcome to attend and listen and see how we conduct our AGMs and see how this chapter has been doing in the last year. And please do follow us on social media, on Twitter and on our LinkedIn page. And you will continue to receive communication from the chapter. We try to push out as much content as we can on a weekly basis about our upcoming events, past events, tidbits, and some small information to support the discipline as well as our followers online. And that concludes the presentation for today. Thank you to everyone for giving us the time and sharing this evening with us. Thank you again, Mr. Michael. And we hope that we all have a great evening and have a wonderful night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.